I mean, I was 6 years old before when I had my farming accident. 4th-degree burns and life flighted to Cincinnati to Shriners Hospital. And so I spent a month there in the hospital, multiple skin graft surgeries. The hospital, it was really neat though. Shriners had a walkway around the hospital. And so like my grandparents could come and I could wave at them through the window, and they'd always bring me something to read or to think about. And at that point it wasn't really why did that happen to me, it was just getting through it. Am I going to survive it? I didn't become a believer until I was 9. So I was born on Easter Sunday and I was baptized Easter Sunday at 9 years old. So my mom calls me the Easter Bunny. So we chuckle about that. At 9 years old and being baptized, I still struggled with how do I walk out my faith and grow and to mature. I was grateful that my mom and dad brought me to church, and literally my mom and dad were some of my Bible, Sunday school teachers. And that was a great thing because I think that laid the foundation for where Stephanie and I are today to try to encourage and teach our children. As I became older and started to realize, as I shared with you, that my actions and my journey didn't align so much, made some bad choices and went down the wrong path, and brokenness of pain or suffering or a dead-end road, broken dream, the things that we battle in life, especially as a young person, not understanding exactly what God had in store for me. We're always questioning and thinking about why did that happen, or where am I going? And finally I started to realize that those choices had ran me into some dead-end paths. I say drive it into the concrete wall, so to speak. Coming back from college and being back involved here, I started to realize that God wanted me here, that I was going to have a life here, and I can remember praying at the altar one Sunday, which was not that normal then. What do you really want out of me? I've been down this road and I've tried this, but this is not working out too well. And so where do you want me? Where do you want to use me? How can I live the life that you have in store for me? And through that change, turning points is what I call them. Through those turning points, I realized that what I knew to be true at 9 years old, I had to refocus. I don't really want to call it rededicate, because God, I was never alone and felt like that I just wasn't always listening. I wasn't always following. I remember meeting Stephanie and starting a future with a family and getting married, and I realized that God was way in front of me with the plan that He had. If I could have caught on to it at a younger age, it would have been probably a lot better experience even than I could have dreamed of. Started teaching Bible study groups and was ordained. That growth period, I could see that God was building a foundation that I was going to need. And I remember vividly a couple of times I would in Bible studies that we would be in a certain chapter or verse, and God would remind me He took away the past and that He was writing the future, but I needed to buckle up and buckle down, that it was going to be a bumpy road. And so amidst the blessings of marriage and family, I started to experience what I call some of the roughest parts of my life. And I lost my father to a tragedy in January of 2013. And those moments that I had with him were very important to me because I realized how his faith that he had always shown me, he had always walked out. He didn't always speak it or share it to me, but he lived it. That was his leadership, was to be a leader, to walk out his faith. And so on that day, I thought it was just a normal day, really. But I got the phone call, and as I headed to experience that, obviously the overwhelming emotion of the fear and the grief, and dealing with what I was seeing and couldn't really understand. There was this sense of peace in our conversation and in the events of trying to piece together what had happened and trying to talk and to know that that help was on the way. Those moments that I got to tell him how much I loved him and how much I was 35 years old and was looking into the eyes of my father that was 30 years older than me, and I realized, that he probably might not make it. I never questioned whether my dad was a believer or if I needed to even pray for where he was going. I was 35 and selfish. I was thinking about, what I was feeling and what I was seeing and what I needed to be doing. It is hard to go back to that day because of the emotion, for sure. But I'm thankful that God gave me an earthly father that lived out the example and was willing to teach me in a way that I could understand by showing me, not just words. And so I tell people all the time that I can relate to that struggle of life hanging and hanging on by a thread, or the depths of grief and those moments where you wish you could go back to, you could say something different or change the way that day unfolded. But my story through that tragedy was that in those following days and weeks, I could not have, on my own strength, I could not have made it through. And so I had to rely on Jesus to carry me through that. I had to rely on people around me to obviously the prayers, the support is what got us through, for sure. And that's always been the case. I don't understand how people can get through life without a church family, without loved ones who are praying and helping and supporting. I know that's been true for our family, and so that's a very important part of my story, is through the grips of pain and suffering, scars and broken dreams and moments that I had to endure, that every time I would reach those times, in that brokenness, that God would shine His light through me. And I had a mentor of mine, a good friend, a brother, tell me that God could not use bitterness. You know, that anytime I felt like I was bitter, that I needed to get beyond the bitterness. He said, God can use you as a broken vessel. God will shine His light through you. It's better to stay broken than to get to that point of staying bitter. And I've tried to live that out as much as possible, because there is truth there. And so through those years of grief, I realized that God could use that pain. He wrote that story, you know, into my life, and so to encourage my own family and my own friends and mentors, I try to always relate to them for where they are, and to talk about my story is to share that personal relationship. And so I began that process of wanting and craving more Jesus, more truth, more grace, more daily devotion, discerning, and where does God want me today? Not to book up my schedule to where I leave Him out. And God's blessed that. God's shown me that I can still be busy, I can still be successful, I can still lead, I can still grow, I can still achieve great things. But when you encounter Christ, when you encounter His blessings and His will and His pathway, there's a much greater joy in the day to know that, you know, everything I did probably doesn't amount to much, but that one prayer, that one moment, that one word of encouragement, that scripture or devotion that makes the day more enjoyable, and then to share it, right? Not just to hold it within. And that's where our faith journey needs to grow, needs to be shared into this community and into the world, and to continue to push back against the darkness. You know, God's light has always shone the brightest, like I said, when I was the most broken, when I couldn't have the strength or the ability. And that's when He came to show me every time that He would never leave me alone, that freedom, that He set me free from the past and from the struggle and from the guilt and the shame, that He closed those doors, and that He showed me the new and the grace and the truth and the mercy, and how He could rewrite that story. And so I had to start every day by thanking God and praising God for that day, to shut those doors and that I can forget the past and to stay focused in the day and not look too far into the future, but just live in the day of what can I do with my wife, my family, and the people I'm working with, and it's the small things. And when we go through the uncertain times, I realize that growth is the new foundation for what's to come. And music has been a part of that journey. There is some great artists that have written so many good songs, and one of my favorites, I have several right now, I guess, but Another in the Fire is one that you've mentioned. And I share that because during the pandemic, Hillsong sang their version. I guess they wrote that song. But anyways, they did a pandemic version of them at, in different locations, and to put that song together. And I relate to that because obviously I'm in my story, Jesus had to stand next to me in the fire when I couldn't breathe or couldn't see the daylight, so to speak, right? I was engulfed, that I could always know that I wasn't alone. And no matter what, that God would not leave me, that Jesus was there to get me through. And that song is so good about reminding us that there is another in the fire, that Jesus is there and that he holds back the waters, right? That we're not going to drown, that we will survive. And if we can just keep that anchor in our daily lives, to know that Jesus is our anchor, he is our rock, he is our foundation. If we can stay anchored in that truth and in his grace, that we will be fine. And that we can keep our head above water enough to not just survive, but to learn to find joy, to expect that life's going to throw us some unexpected things, and that we're going to grow, we're going to survive, we're going to find our way through that journey, and that we're going to look back and be able to praise God for it.
There is another.